Hello, everyone. Welcome. We'll give a few seconds for everyone to keep coming in, but super exciting to be here with both the Worldcoin and the Safe communities. Should be a fun 45 minutes. I'll get started because we do have a jam-packed session. My name is Tiago Sada. I'm head of product here at Tools for Humanity, which is a contributor to the Worldcoin project. I'm really excited to talk to you today about everything self-custodial wallets with our special guest, Lukas, one of the co-founders of Safe, formerly gnosis Safe, and also with Philipp, who is a founding team member at Tools for Humanity, has been working on the Worldcoin ecosystem for almost 4 years at this point, and is head of engineering currently. So once again, should be a super interesting conversation, and I'll let Lukas introduce himself in a moment. Before that, just a few housekeeping items. First and most importantly, we'd love to hear from you. The whole point of doing this on Twitter is that this should be social. And so if you have any questions, please drop them on the thread that is linked with the space. And toward the end, we'll try to get to as many questions as we can. So please keep them coming. Beyond that, you've probably noticed that it's been a pretty eventful week at Worldcoin. Today, we just announced a new integration with Okta's Auth0, which will enable thousands of developers to super easily integrate with WorldID. We also launched Orbs for the first time in a long time in Germany, and we're very excited about that. And a couple of sharp-eyed people have noticed that there's some stuff going on with the ongoing Optimism migration. So that's super exciting to see. Now, today we'll keep it specifically to the smart contract wallets. And this was triggered by Vitalik's recent blog post about the 3 transitions. If you haven't read it, I recommend it. It's a pretty good blog post where specifically he talks about the fact that there's 3 things that are missing for crypto to go mainstream. One of them is privacy. The second one is L2 scaling. And then the third is getting everyone to move to smart contract wallets. And so with that, maybe Lukas, you can introduce yourself, tell us a bit about yourself, and tell us about what Safe is and how it's contributing to solve this problem that Vitalik talked about.
All right. GM, everyone, and thanks for having me. Yeah, I'm Lukas. I'm one of the founding team members of Safe. We're a spin-off of Gnosis, where I joined 5 years ago. And at Safe, we're building infrastructure for smart contract wallets, which is also often referred to as account abstraction. Yeah, so having worked for 5 years on smart contract wallets, it actually wasn't a big surprise when Vitalik posted this blog post and saying that the transition to smart contract wallet is one of the key things that we have to achieve as an ecosystem. Yeah, what I found was quite interesting is that Vitalik was quite straightforward in saying that these transitions are not going to be automatic. It's something that we have to come together as an ecosystem to achieve. Having privacy technology being adopted, moving usage to L2s, and adopting smart contract wallets for users is something that we have to put in a lot of effort to achieve. And the thing is, if we don't achieve this, like Ethereum might not be feasible in the future. So it is 3 quite critical transitions. And on that note, also quite happy to see Worldcoin with the World app actually working on all 3 of those in a way, having adopted Safe for the smart contract wallet functionality, leveraging the tools for scalability, and also working on privacy technologies with zero-knowledge proofs for WorldID. Yeah, quite exciting that you work on all fronts of such important transitions.
Yeah, maybe, Philipp, that's a good point to ask you. Like, why did we choose to use, first of all, just smart contract wallets in general when we were building World app, right? What was the difference with the different options that we had, and why did you end up settling first on smart contract wallets and then specifically on Safe?
Yeah, sure. So first of all, our original motivation was, we mostly came from the idea of we want to allow very smooth, probably closer to Web 2 experience for users in the World app than the average wallet right now out there. And so we're mostly motivated by abstraction of fees. So generally the account abstraction part of the Safe. And of course, the future optionality of adding social recovery or other recovery methods to it. But I would think it's mostly coming from the abstraction part. And also the huge optionality of allowing users to pay fees in USDC, so they don't even need to own any ETH or any Matic or any native token.
Okay. Lukas, on your side of things, why do people usually, what's the main benefit of smart contract wallets or account abstraction? There's a couple of different things that people like about them, but in your experience, what is usually a killer feature that gets people to use them instead of other things?
Yeah, maybe stepping back a little bit, we do see that today's Web3 world is far from perfect, with people struggling to onboard it because there's a lot of technical complexity, with security issues, with people getting hacked all the time or losing their private keys. Something like 10% of all Bitcoin is lost just because people forgot where their seed phrase is or lost access to their hardware wallet. And smart contract wallets, what we're working on trying to achieve is go away from these old school private key-based accounts. So you can imagine these private key-based accounts to be a little bit like the old cell phones, which had all features as part of hardware buttons and a little screen on top. And what we want to go to is more like a smartphone, something that is just purely a screen, but then you can program all the features, security or UX features as additional applications on top. And that's pretty much what the account abstraction is, moving the logic. The account is authenticated, what features it has from the core protocol, from the blockchain, up a level to the smart contract layer, and encoding all of that as part of smart contracts. So we've built that with Safe as a modular smart account ecosystem. So that's pretty much like the screen in the iPhone. And then we allow others like Worldcoin to build on top of that and build their own feature sets, their own experiences on that.
Yeah, that makes sense. And which of those, can you talk about a bit about the different modules that Safe offers? I think that would be quite interesting for people to hear.
Yeah, so you mentioned what is the killer feature. I think what most people associate Safe today is multisig, which is one of the features that's enabled through account abstraction. So you say your account is not just controlled by one private key, but actually multiple ones. That's super helpful for you as an individual if you want to have a multi-factor setup, which is quite common also in regular banking applications where you have to collect multiple authentications to make a transaction. But it's also super useful for teams and DAOs that want to distribute the ownership of assets to multiple people, and they have different keys distributed to different people that then coordinate on making transactions. There's other modules and features such as abstracting gas away. So users don't have to deal with the gas limit, gas price. This can be handled by the wallet or by the application where they sponsor transactions, and other things like allowances, where you say you have a very secure setup, multi-factor authentication, everything, but then you delegate a certain allowance, a daily spending limit of sorts to a key. And this can be a lower security key, which maybe lives locally on your device, which allows you to make easy transactions. And only if you go beyond that, you then have to collect all your signatures. That's just a few of many things.
That's super cool. It's super interesting. Every time we dive into the docs and see what else we want to build into the World app, it's quite fun to see all of the big menu of things that the Safe components already support. Maybe one of the things that you started with there, Lukas, was 10% of the Bitcoin is lost. And that is mostly technical people, right? That is people that know what a seed phrase is, and because getting that Bitcoin in the first place was probably super hard. As we take crypto mainstream, that probably becomes even a more tricky problem. You guys have both said quite a bit about the importance of recovery, the importance of having an experience like Web tool. What does that look like in smart contract wallets today, Lukas? What type of recoveries are you seeing out there? Do you think the recovery that we see today, are those enough? Or what other type of things should products like World App explore to make these wallets even harder to lose or even impossible to lose?
Yeah, so the simplest way of recovery is if you set up by a account abstraction just a different set of keys that can be used as recovery keys. Then you put in a very secure location and you ensure that you always have access to those. One that's very popular is social recovery. That's also Vitalik Buterin is a huge fan of this concept and is pushing that quite a lot. He say you have full control over your account. You have your keys in any way. And if you lose those keys, you actually define a set of trusted parties, friends and family, that is upfront, like authenticated to give you back access to your account via a recovery scheme. And then you just have to collect like a threshold of these people, which you can define before. So you say you have these 5 friends and you have to go to at least 2 of those to give you back access to your account. And that's then called social recovery. There's one where I personally think it's going to be most adopted in the future, which is more of a custodial recovery, where you say you don't want. Right now, there's 2 options. You say you have full control yourself, or you use a custodial service like a centralized exchange. But there's actually something in between where you say you have your own keys that give you full access over your account, but you might trust for the pure sake of recovery a third party, be it a bank, insurance, notary, maybe even a centralized exchange, which then has the capability to recover your account. Maybe with some additional restrictions, such as a time lock or some bonds that's part of it, so that it cannot be abused by this party. But there's this custodian of last recovery, which I think probably will be quite an appealing mechanisms for most people. It's also similar like Ledger Recover, even though they messed it up a little bit, but they also have some sort of custodial recovery as part of it.
Yeah. Have you seen any companies other than Ledger start to offer this service?
Ledger partners up with CoinCover, so they offer it like also as a base technology. There's others that we are also talking to, actually also in like licensed banks, for example, that are keen to exploring this because they have the infrastructure, they have some level of trust for users, and they're keen to get into this and to provide the value proposition also in a self-custodial ecosystem. Yeah.
That's super interesting. Yeah, and it makes a lot of sense, right? You, like you say, you can get the best of both worlds. You can have like full custody of your wallets, but if you want to trust someone to also help you recover it, it is useful, right? Because setting up that social recovery with you said 5 trusted friends or something like that always had a little bit more friction. And then you have to make sure that your friends don't lose their own wallets and things like that. So this is definitely an interesting path. Philipp, what about you? What do you think about this recovery side of things? I know this is something that you and I talk quite a bit about. What other paths do you see to solve this matter of recovery when it comes to just like lower dollar amounts and for just normal everyday people?
Yeah, generally I'm also a big fan of social recovery, I have to say. I think this is like clearly as soon as you have mainstream adoption, like probably an option that is also very accessible for the everyday person. Like right now, it's also more of an issue that not many people have crypto, have a wallet. So it's also hard to find another friend that's be able to secure or be a signer in your smart contract wallet or like for recovery, right? So I think a lot of this will be solved as for like eventually with crypto going mainstream. So there will be just enough people that you can, or like enough friends that you can make recovery partners or custodians. And then I think there's, yeah, as we also already just mentioned, like a big place for custodial players to be at least one party in the setup of multiple parties or like multiple peers.
Yeah, that makes sense. Have you heard of any paths beyond social recovery that sort of makes sense to you, or nothing really out there?
I think there's not much room between either go custodial or like fully peer-to-peer, right? You can then add like maybe one trusted party in the setup versus just a single one that has all of the access to funds, which is then not self-custodial anymore. But I think you will have some form of like more nuanced mixture between custodial and non-custodial recovery partners, but I don't think there will be, like there are too many other options.
Yeah, it is a tricky problem. I know that ourselves for World App and what most self-custodial wallets have done, at least for now, is that we facilitate users to back up their keys to either iCloud or Google Drive. But just like when you create an account on WhatsApp and you have all of your chats and you want to back that up to iCloud so you can recover them with a different phone, there's a similar setup. And I think that a bunch of wallets around the world do something like this where they encrypt your keys. You can back them up to iCloud, and then when you get a new phone, you can just restore it with that. But it's not ideal, right? Because if you, for whatever reason, lose that backup, then you're done. So definitely something along the lines of social recovery makes a lot more sense and is more resilient, which I think it's interesting. Let's get a bit into World App, right? So we announced World App about a month and a half ago, I want to say. And it's been super exciting to see people's response. As of today, almost 2 million people have used the orbs and have gotten a verified World ID. A little bit more than that have used World App, and a ton of those use it every month and every day. So it's really cool to see. And I know that when we were building World App, it was very important for us to have the right balance of, we wanted to preserve all of the important properties of crypto, right? The privacy, the decentralization, the self-custody, but also we wanted to have the UX that would be friendly enough and simple enough for normal people to use, right? And so that meant doing things like abstracting certain steps. That meant just simplifying a bunch of flows. And as part of this, we had to choose which blocks, if you want to call it that way, right? Which composability breaks from the ecosystem we wanted to use. And so to facilitate token trading, we ended up using Uniswap and just abstracting it away a little bit. And one of those decisions was to use Safe for the actual underlying wallets. Maybe, Philipp, you can talk a bit about our journey to ended up being Safe, because we actually did not start there. So what else did we consider, and what are the bunch of different things that we tried along the way? And then maybe you can talk about why did we end up in Safe, and why are we still using Safe, even as all accounts are in the process of being migrated to Optimism.
Sure. Go back in time, actually, originally we started out building our own L2 customized to payments, right? So Hubble. So this is where the first accounts of users were living. And this, as I mentioned, was mostly an L2 for payments. So it did not support general, like over computation or like any smart contract wallets of sorts. So it was also just a simple signing key. So this was the first step. Then we actually decided we want more than simple payments in the World App. We'll migrate to a full EVM chain, so Polygon. And originally we also just started out with giving every user just a key, right, and back it up to iCloud. Just the practical use of having a key and then having to have funds to send transactions and refill was like not really giving users a good experience. So we then looked into options to solve for account abstraction or like smart contract wallets. And yeah, I think the choice there is pretty much clear on Safe at this point, because it's, I think, securing the most volume or like the most total value. And it's been around for a long time. I think there's some argument to be made there that it's very much battle tested. And yeah, so I think we definitely started out in this a bit more unconventional idea of just using it for account abstraction, just for handling the gas part, but we will implement the recovery options later on. So that's the evolution of the integration, I would say.
Yeah, that makes sense. Lukas, I'm wondering, did you guys, because I don't think we ever gave you a heads up that we were going to start deploying a bunch of safes from Polygon when we started doing it. It was probably last September when we migrated from EOAs to smart contract wallets. What do you think when you started just seeing like a couple 100,000 and then more safes just randomly popping up?
Yes, that was actually funny because, as you say, like suddenly just on Polygon, we got a lot of traction on Safe. We just see this via our Dune dashboards, and we saw a lot of Safe accounts being deployed, and we had no idea where this was coming from. And I actually don't know how long it took us afterwards. Maybe it was weeks, maybe months, until we actually figured out that it was you. And that also for me is exciting because it shows also this power of permissionless innovation. Like, you don't have to approach us. You don't have to talk to the Safe team in order to build on Safe. It's like a library that you can just use, that anyone can use and build upon and extend. And it doesn't require any licensing agreement, any payments. Like, it's just out there for anyone to build on.
Yeah, I remember when you and I first talked, probably a few weeks after we started deploying, I DM'd you. Or I think someone from the Safe team DM'd us when you guys found out that it was us, asking if you could help with anything, which was super useful. And then I DM'd you and I was like, hey, like we're the largest deployers of Safe right now. We should probably talk just to tell you a bit about our roadmap. And And you can tell us a bit about your roadmap. And so we started syncing up to see, okay, like what is coming up for us? How can we help you guys? And what is coming up also on your end, and how you could help us. But that was definitely, it's like really cool to see that is the case on crypto, where just as people can use WorldID without asking permission, we can use Safe without asking for your permission. So that's awesome. And Lukas, a bit on that note, we've talked a bit about how you see Safe evolving, right? The project evolved from the Gnosis days now into Safe. Maybe you could talk a bit about, for the next 12 months or so, like where do you see Safe going? What will it enable for developers that it doesn't enable yet today? What can people look forward to?
Yeah. So in general, like we want to build an ecosystem building on a shared infrastructure, because also backtracking a little bit with account abstraction, there is actually a risk as we transition to this transition Vitalik describes to smart contract accounts. There is a risk of every wallet now implementing their own smart contract like implementation and having their own accounts as smart contract accounts. And the risk there is that for once, obviously, this increases the security risk in these apps, because every new smart contract has some level of security risk, and it's just a matter of time until one of them is getting hacked. Safe has been out there for 5 years and it's quite battle tested. But actually, the bigger risk is that like there's a lack of standardization, a lack of composability then, and also a lack of portability of these accounts. Imagine now every wallet having their own smart contract implementation. You cannot move from one wallet to the other wallet anymore, which is one of the key elements of Web3, that you're not locked into this one system, but you can actually seamlessly move between providers and you don't have these walled garden systems. So what we want to achieve now in the next months is to build this out in further, that we say Safe is this smartphone-like account where you can build different integrations on top, but we want to somehow ensure the security of these different integrations. So if you imagine every of these integrations is like an app on a smartphone, so it can have bugs, it can be malicious. And what we want to achieve is build a protocol around these integrations, around these plugins that gives certain security guarantees to all of them and somehow ties them all together so that you have this security of an app store where you know each of these apps in there is actually legitimate, it was somehow vetted, and it allows peace of mind for the users. That's a key thing. And that also comes together with just building out our developer tooling. We have the Safe Core SDK suite, which enables developers to leverage Safe in many different ways for gas abstraction, for authentication, for fiat on-off ramps. And there we just built these developer toolings out, add new features. One interesting one is coming in a few days, actually, around how can we tie together crypto better with the traditional banking system. And yeah, look forward for that. And yeah, there's a lot to come. I don't want to give away too much.
Yeah, that's exciting. That's exciting. Yeah, I know that not just as a community member, but as a developer that relies on Safe. We're super excited to see everything you guys are working on. Before we continue, just a reminder, everyone, we have about 15 minutes left at most on the space. So if you have any questions, feel free to drop them right now on the thread that is linked to the space so that we're able to get to them. If we do not get to them or you have them later, just feel free to tag either the Safe team or Worldcoin on Twitter, and different people will try to get back to you. But I think another interesting thing, Lukas, is that we can talk maybe a bit about is I think there's a very obvious set of financial use cases for Safe, right? I think just like wallets have started a lot with DeFi, Safe started on the DeFi side of things. But now you start seeing certain projects like Worldcoin, right, which go beyond the financial. In the case of Worldcoin, we do a bunch of things around identity. And really the infrastructure you guys are building is just keys, right? And so I guess something that I'm curious about is what other types of use cases do you see for wallets and specifically for Safes, given the advantages that something like Safe has, beyond financial use cases over the next 2-3 years?
Yeah. So right now you're right, mostly considered to be something that you use for financial use cases, to interact with DeFi, to hold tokens. I think over time this will change dramatically, where your wallet is not just a way to interact with financial applications, but also your like messaging platform, for example, your gaming account, but maybe also your just like online profile, online identity, or real world identity even. And that's actually something that long term I think is going to be much more critical, that we figure out the UX and the security around how do you self-custody your identity, because an identity can be much more important than even financial assets. Like you can lose your keys to your wallet that holds money, and that's in some cases really bad. But losing the keys to your identity, which is in some cases not recoverable at all, you cannot just create a new identity or build up all the trust that was associated with an identity, whether that's a real world identity or some digital identity, just that easily. Like it's a single one-time thing. I think there it's becoming even more important that we figure out how to build this in a way users are feeling secure to have this in a self-custodial manner.
Yeah, totally. Philipp, on our side, and not specifically on the case of identity, we think a lot about recovery, right, and backup of identities. What are some of the unique challenges of backing up and restoring that compared to, say, like a crypto wallet?
Yeah, I think the biggest problem clearly is privacy. So it all works well with the current approach if you think of identity as like a public thing, right? And it's similar to a wallet, right? You just receive badges or some attestation as similar to an NFT, which doesn't happen to be transferable maybe, right? It's just bound to your wallet. But as soon as you try to prove the fact that you own it, you have to hide away which wallet it actually is, right? And therefore you need to have some entropy, some secret that pretty much only you know. And that's something that a smart contract wallet cannot help you with, right? So very different to normal signing process, the different parties in the multisig and the smart contract wallet do not come together and create a secret together. They will pretty much just provide their individual secrets. So it's a kind of different mental model for like private identity, I think, that will be required. And definitely needs to be like another form of entropy if you want to have privacy preserving proofs of attestations.
Yeah.
Well, Lukas, do you have any thoughts on
I'm
this?
curious to hear Lukas' thoughts on this. Yeah.
Sorry, didn't get the end.
All good. I think what Philipp was saying is, he was saying that the challenge with treating identity recovery like just what we would do with wallet recovery today is privacy, right? Like you essentially need to have a source of entropy. And so it becomes tricky to have a multi-sig type setup. And so I wonder, is this something you guys have ever thought about? How Safe could facilitate private versions of identities? It's obviously like an experimental or a research question, right? But is this something you guys have ever thought about? Or are you right now focused mostly just on public addresses and making those work?
Yeah, so essentially from a Safe context, identities are pseudonymous. So like we deal with keys and we don't associate a specific identity with those. So it's more than the applications on top, like World ID that gives a Safe an identity. So yeah, we haven't done too much there in terms of privacy, but I do see more and more projects that build around Safe, that try to use zero knowledge proofs in different ways to bring in more privacy tech. But we ourselves haven't launched anything in that regard.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense. Looking here at the questions, once again, if you have any questions in the last few minutes, feel free to drop them on the thread that is linked on the space. There's quite a few questions about when will there be orbs in this or that country. I see here questions about the US, the UAE, and a couple of other countries. So generally speaking, Worldcoin is still in beta phase. That means that there's not that many orbs out there. We have about 300 orbs around the world. Today, that is the most we've ever had. And we are slowly expanding to more and more places. Starting this week, there's now orbs in Germany. And so if you are in Germany, you can now visit an orb in Berlin. And when Worldcoin launches officially, there will be significantly more orbs in significantly more places. And so definitely stay tuned on socials and on the app if you want to know as soon as there's orbs around you. But we're working super hard to get them to everyone around the world. I think we're getting close to wrap up. Lukas, I've been asking all the questions. And so now let me turn it over to you. Is there something that you think we should talk about? Do you have any questions for us, for Philipp and myself? Or is there anything just on your mind that you would like to mention?
I don't know. I'm generally curious seeing Worldcoin or the World app now being built on Safe, like how the Safe ecosystem evolving, like how you long-term want to contribute to it. Because what is interesting is that not having built something yourself, building on existing tools like ENS, Optimism, Safe, now you're part of wider ecosystems in many ways. And I'm curious just generally the Worldcoin's strategy on like how do you plan to contribute to these different ecosystems, be it Optimism, ENS, Safe? What role does it play to build on existing infrastructure versus insourcing these things?
Yeah, do you want to take that, Philipp? Sure.
Then feel free to add things. But I think from my side, at least from the tech side, I will see two parts of the contributions that we bring. Like on the infrastructure side, we already have to do a bunch of things internally to actually get all of those transactions relayed, and we have quite some decent peak volume of transactions that we send through like the World app or like actually through the backend, right? Because they're signed on the user's phone, but then relayed due to the account abstraction through the backend. And I think we can contribute a lot back on that side that will open source eventually. And yeah, I think mostly comes from dealing with high volume of transactions amounts. And on the other hand, I think on the identity side, that's also where we were pointing towards before. There's, I think, a bunch of interesting connections between identity and recovery. And I think that's probably long-term our biggest contribution on the WLD side.
Yeah, I think what I would add there is generally, like you say, Lukas, we're trying to build as much as possible on existing open protocols rather than just build our own private versions of them. But a lot of things that we work on, we've had to like level up in a way or fine tune or hack around to be able to support the scale. And so I think a good example is SEMA, for example, which is the attestations protocol that WorldID is built on top of. This is a project from the Ethereum Foundation, and it's something where today we're the main contributors to that, and all of our work is fully open source. And as we contribute to Optimism and as we're getting this migration ready, everything that we're building behind the scenes for Safe and for basically everything we touch, you'll see us continuing to open source that so that people don't have to go through the pains that we're going through across the board. But I will say Safe has been one of those things where maybe we haven't published any of these contributions because it's where we've had to do the least amount of tweaking. It's just the thing that has been the most ready for us to just pick it up and run with it at the scale that we are. But I do expect that as we continue to grow and continue to integrate it more deeply with the ID, for example, all of that stuff will be open source and we'll be happy to keep back to the community in that way.
Yeah, definitely curious what you're going to come up with around recovery, because that's something no one has figured out yet. And I think there's a lot of potential. And in general, it excites me to see finally this vision of Web3 coming to fruition, where we have these protocols where like projects are building on, and it's still quite early, but imagine there's not just like Worldcoin that's part of the Optimism ecosystem, it's also Base and Zora, and soon it's going to be hundreds of thousands, and all of them will contribute in some way back to these protocols, to these ecosystems, and create these hugely valuable public goods for others to use. So quite excited what the future is also from Safe's perspective.
Yeah, I think I could not have said it best, so I think we'll leave it at that. I'm also very excited to see all of this beautiful composability, weird mixing and matching happening. Let's keep working on that. Once again, thank you, Lukas, for taking the time to talk with us. Very happy to hear a bit more of Safe and very excited to continue just working together, making all these things happen. Thank you as well, Philipp, and thank you for everyone that listened in. If you think of any last minute questions that you have and you forgot to ask during the space, feel free to just shoot them on Twitter to either of the teams and we'll be happy to get to you. Thank you, everyone, and see you on the next space.